Okay, I would like to welcome you all to this meeting of the Sustainability Advisory Board. It is March 1st, and I want to check and see. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I think that we have quorum. Lisa, you will probably be voting tonight, just so you're aware. The people that I'm not seeing at all, do we know that they're actually there, Brandon? Can you tell?
Nope, as far as I know, they're there. I don't know if they are or not, but we can do roll call here and see who's all present.
Okay, why don't you do roll call? That'll be good.
Okay, Pat.
I see her. She must not hear us yet.
We'll continue. Eric, can you say present, please?
Sorry.
Thank you. Margie.
I'm here.
Michelle.
Present.
Ken. Vic.
Present.
Lisa.
Here.
Brad.
Present.
Bob.
Here.
And Pat.
Pat, we're taking roll call. Can you hear us? Well, we're going to assume she's here because we can see her. Hopefully she can also hear us. Okay, let's see, let's do approval of the minutes from February 1st. You all got these ahead of time. Would someone like to move to approve them as written?
I move to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Thank you, Bob. Do I hear a second?
I'll second. That's Brad.
Thank you, Brad. Okay, all in favor of approval of the minutes from the last meeting as written? Say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Okay, then we shall move on. Tonight we have a presentation by AdvoCap. It's about weatherization, and Jason Vandervelden is going to be sharing with us. So I will turn it over to you, Jason. I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to say hi before.
All good. I appreciate the intro there, and happy to be with you today and working through some challenges with virtual meetings, right? We all get along with that, but yeah, representing AdvoCap, I'm actually coming to you live here from the corner of Harrison and Bowen Street at the Oshkosh office, one of many that AdvoCap has, but we'll talk about our weatherization assistance program. So I'm going to share some content with.
So are you at the AdvoCap office? It's like on the corner of Harrison and right there?
Yep, you're correct. That's where the entire weatherization program for AdvoCap operates out of. So, kind of talk, we do serve 3 counties, but yeah, everything basically originates from right here at this office.
Oh, awesome. Okay, thanks.
All right. I trust you can see that. All right.
Yes.
Is it possible for you to?
Yeah, I'm going to
go bigger.
How about that?
Oh, thank you. Much better.
Sure. Well, a little introduction. For those that may or may not be familiar with AdvoCap, but a private nonprofit, a CAP agency, community action program, one of many throughout the state, but the one that does serve the entire city of Oshkosh, all of Winnebago County, and we do work in Fond du Lac and Green Lake counties as well, contingent upon program and funding sources and things like that. But I'm going to try to gear this specifically towards the city of Oshkosh, I guess, because that's who you people do serve so well. So these are actual residents of Oshkosh as well that we served at one point in the past. We're lucky enough to convince them to take a little, smile for us picture, and we use that at a couple different purposes. But and hopefully, maybe if you're out and about, you've seen our AdvoCap. Those are all weatherization trucks, those box trucks that are on the road all the time too. So hopefully creating a little bit of familiarity with what we're doing out there, and can put those trucks to programs, I guess, or associate them going forward. But, so I'll roll through these slides. Basic intro to kind of the national level, specifically what we're doing, and then the impact that we're having. Weatherization programs, ours, it has a pretty deep roots already in the community. So, I'm interested on how I can be helpful and what I can share today, and then maybe answer questions for you at any point, or speak up. It's a challenge, I guess, to kind of interject during these, but or just save them for the end, and we can chat about it then too. But first thing I generally just kind of share is weatherization programs. It's kind of a tricky word. Weatherization doesn't get used a lot, but it is based in energy efficiency and making those improvements to energy efficiency in households. And it's nationwide. This mission statement comes from the Department of Energy on the federal level, but you can read it here. The mission is basically increasing the energy efficiency of the house, which then results in reduced year-round energy costs and the people that we serve: low-income families, elderly, people with disabilities, and children, of course. And a part of this program also is ensuring their health and safety, but then providing long-term relief from expensive energy bills. And you can imagine, I guess, the sustainability aspect of that as well. So hopefully I'm fitting right in with what you're trying to talk about here. It's been around since 1977, so a long history. It does. AdvoCap is, we like to consider ourselves unique, but just one of many that deliver this program nationwide. Every county in the country has a weatherization program and opportunity to increase energy efficiency for households. The funding, we get this question a lot, where do you get the money to do all this work? And it's multi-tiered. Federally, the Department of Energy gives us a substantial budget to work with, and they spread that money out through all 50 states, along with the federal LIHEAP program. Now that acronym is Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program. It's then kind of transferred to a WEAP program, which I'll mention later, but they're again energy assistance programs. And then we're in a very fortunate state, in a somewhat unique situation in the state of Wisconsin, because a few decades ago, state legislature enacted what was called public benefits legislation. What that did is give us a whole lot more funding to use energy related, basically. So everybody here, I'm sure, probably has a utility bill. I put a little line item on there I shared from my own, and you may have seen this, familiar with it yourself, but we all as ratepayers are contributing to energy efficiency programs like the one that we're doing right here. It's a substantial part of the budget, and why we're able to serve so many households, and why Wisconsin has a really robust weatherization program already. There's a team approach, just a pretty simple flow chart here. You can kind of see funding, guidance, policy creation at the federal level in Washington, D.C. kind of trickles down to our state capital here in Madison with the Department of Administration, and now is the Division of Energy, Housing and Community Resources, Becker. And then that is to subgrantees like AdvoCap. And there are, I think, 18 other CAP agencies, housing authorities that are delivering the weatherization program across our state. And that funding and all of that work and everything that goes into homes finally delivered to low-income Americans or low-income Oshkosh residents that you may know and that we serve. This kind of brings me though to the partnership that weatherization programs have, because weatherization and energy efficiency is almost like a response, right, to an initial need for assistance with utility costs, right? So, well, a lot of times we do get calls from people that are generally just interested in, I want to reduce energy consumption, I have comfort issues in my home, how do I about qualifying for weatherization assistance? Generally, everybody that we're serving is first impacted by that I mentioned before, the LIHEAP program, which then when it comes to Wisconsin is known as the WEAP program, or the Wisconsin Home Energy Assistance Program. it's financial assistance. It's available to help with heating costs and electric costs to anybody that's at or below 60% of the state's median income. Our partners in that, and I'll say in Oshkosh specifically, and I think it's on Pearl down by like the bus stop and the Social Security Administration building, is Energy Services Inc., which is another nonprofit, but they actually are the administrator of this WEAP program. So everybody in Oshkosh, in our service territory that qualifies for energy assistance, that's the first step, and that is the initial step of being eligible and being marketed to, you know, I guess, spurred on to weatherization assistance, because of course, if you struggle a little bit with your utility bill, it just makes a ton of sense to look at ways to make your home more energy efficient, because that's where you would see long-term reductions in those costs. And it's not all about costs, and I'll kind of touch on that a little bit later. Any questions yet? Anything about just kind of the general nature of the program, its existence, what we've been doing, how we've been doing, what we're actually into over here? I go through it pretty quick. It's actually, I mean, it's pretty complicated, but I'll talk about what we've actually been up to. I'm going to use some stats that are maybe seems a little bit older here as far as program year 19. That's kind of a fiscal year that for us was the back half of 2019 and the front half of 2020. And we probably all realize, you know, 2020 got a little complicated with pandemic related issues and some closures and some delays and things like that. So we don't have stats from the last program year quite yet that ran to October, but you know, these are pretty standard. Our budget, while there are some ebbs and flows with the amount of funding that we do get, has been very, very ordinary, I guess, and you know, pretty standard, I guess, for the last 7 years without a whole lot of fluctuation up or down with it. So these numbers are very typical of the results that we have every single year over and over again. So it's always about 200 houses plus or minus, maybe a large multifamily building or something like that that plays a big role into that final result, but about 200 homes all the time. Yeah, the vast majority, you know, are probably single family houses. We do mobile homes, and that's kind of an aspect of low income people that we're trying to serve. And then there are 2 to 4 unit buildings. You can see though that 90% are owner occupied. So these people do own their own homes, but you know, they're at an income level, of course, where these improvements are just kind of not real cost prohibitive or a little cost prohibitive for them to kind of approach. And then 10% are rental properties, and we work with those owners and landlords to service those properties as well. And we have a rental policy that does sometimes ask for contributions to cover some of the financial costs. That's up to the AdvoCap as an agency to implement, and our board of directors has kind of guided us in that route. But they approved a policy I submitted 2 years ago, and I'm hoping to have a little bit bigger of an impact with our ability to serve renters as well. City of Oshkosh, I think everybody has natural gas for their heat, and unless maybe electric heat every once in a while, but the vast majority of the people that we serve in cities like Oshkosh and Neenah and Menasha and Fond du Lac, which is the largest part of our demographic, all do have natural gas heated homes. We do, of course, encourage and are happy when we have rural customers, because, you know, if we see 6%, 7%, you know, that are propane or fuel oil, they actually have the highest heating costs because of the cost of those fuels. And then electric heated homes as well still are out there and surviving on electric baseboard and electric radiators as well. So they're the most effective things that we do, you know, air sealing, kind of limiting drafts in homes in ways that you probably wouldn't be familiar, I guess. It's not just sweeps on the bottom of doors, it's a lot of attic air sealing and key junctures in homes that are pretty specific to our field about ways to eliminate that and the tools that we use to do it. Attic and wall insulation is kind of the more standard one that we do all the time. Heating system replacements, you know, I've got some pictures that we'll look at in a little bit here. And then a big one to consider, you know, is water heater and heating fuel system switches. I kind of mentioned, depending on what the cost of your, or what your heating fuel type may be, or your water heating fuel type, to consider changing that to something that is less costly can be a big saver as well. So 43 houses in Oshkosh. I'm kind of repeating that number about 200 all the time, but our average investment of weatherization funding is just over $7,500 into these homes. You know, factually here, this number came from programming from FY19. The actual savings, which is divulged to us through utility companies for those households, was $530. And that was in the first year, right? So we served them, you know, they averaged $530 of utility savings in that first year. And, you know, that'll just keep giving, you know, year after year after year. And depending on the cost of electricity, the cost of natural gas, that number may be higher, that number may be lower. So it does, with inflation, even grow over the course of time. So let's give it maybe 20 years, maybe some things last 10 years, some things last 30 years, depending on what that happens to be that we did for them. But we can project over the course of time that, you know, that household might save over $10,000, $12,000 in energy costs that they're not writing checks to Wisconsin Public Service. You know, they're able to spend that in their community on necessities, you know, things that someone on a fixed income or a lower income may have some challenges with. And then, yeah, project that $107,000 this year alone for those, if we serve 200 people, 200 households, and they're each saving that, you know, it's $100,000 this year alone. $2.5 million, you know, that we're making an impact of. And I kind of mentioned, I mean, you know, it's been around since 1977 making these impacts in people's houses. You know, the last 10 years alone, 2,000 people. You know, Oshkosh residents, it seems small with 43 households this year, but that's a number that repeats itself and has repeated itself year after year. So, you know, the impact on cost, on financial end of it, you can imagine in these communities what the you know, what the effects are. Maybe more up your alley here with sustainability and energy consumption and the, you know, the results of that. If we can, you know, kind of talk about cumulative here, natural gas savings for these homes, that equals about 150 or 200 therms annually per home per year. And you can see it makes a little sense too that the higher energy users, the really big homes that have a lot of heat loss going on, you know, they can save as much as 400 therms a year. In electricity savings, it's kind of I'd say a three-pronged approach, right? Because you're trying to reduce heating fuel consumption, you're trying to reduce electricity consumption, but then there's an aspect that we're also kind of tied into health and safety of individuals. So it's indoor air quality issues, it's remediating asbestos and lead paint issues. You create healthier homes, you know, and some safety measures too. But so electricity savings, again, you're seeing about 1,300 kilowatt hours annually that we're saving per home per year. And that, what does that equate to? You know, if we're not using natural gas therms and KWH, that's not fossil fuel created energy in a lot of cases. Either, you know, by coal-fired power plants or, you know, fracked natural gas that's coming in, even if it's domestically. But, you know, in the first year here, 300 plus metric tons of CO2 that is not going into the atmosphere because it is not energy that's needed. And that's 6,000 tons over the measured lifespan of the buildings. And that's just what we did in FY19. And then nationally, you can think about the reduction in the consumption of oil by about 24 million barrels. And that's annually, nationwide. Just the stat I could find that was most, I guess, appropriate. But again, just you know, it's a cycle that repeats itself because this weatherization program is so entrenched in, you know, our federal and our state budgets that it's been doing work for a really long time. So these results just kind of culminate over the course of time. We'll continue to do work in the future with it too. So hopefully, it's making an impact on our atmosphere and, you know, the air that we breathe and the environment and the impacts that, you know, extraction of fossil fuels has as well. So that financial impact on the households themselves and kind of, you know, a community-wide thing about having more disposable income and what you use that for. And then the impact it has on the environment and everything too from the reduction of that energy. So it's a really, you know, it's a rewarding program to work for, and has some very nice aspects of it that just make a ton of sense to invest in. couple pictures quick about, how does this really go on? On the right, top hand right side, you can see an old refrigerator that's using a whole lot of electricity just to maintain a certain temperature. On the further right, a new Energy Star product that we put in. Van Breedy's, another Oshkosh plug here is a vendor that we work with to do all of these appliance replacements. So they offer us new Energy Star products, save, 50%, 75% of the electricity that an older model would have used. Water heater replacements, again, you'll save on, the heating costs for the water usage potentially with shower heads and aerators that we install along with it. And then if we're able to switch from electricity fuel to natural gas, there's just a ton of dollar savings that way too, to heat water at the same temperature that you'd have anyways. And then your old chimney vented furnaces that are 75, 80% efficient, swapping those things out for new ones that are, top of the line, 96% efficient, saving a whole lot of natural gas. Instead of sending heat up the chimney, it's staying in the house that way too. So sometimes it's simple appliances. And contractors that we use are all local people as well. So if we're working with heating contractors and plumbers and appliance vendors, like I imagine, it has an impact on our community too. So, and then the big stuff, the stuff that our AdvoCap staff do is a lot of the insulation and air sealing. So they're in some of those dirty, tight spots that people generally don't venture into in their homes, like attics, like basements and crawl spaces. They're installing. Actually, I'd like to plug this too. It's cellulose insulation. So that gray stuff that's being blown all over the place. We do like 7 semi-trucks loads of that stuff. It's all recycled paper. So if you can kind of think about the sustainability aspect of, we're recycling paper into an insulation product that's installed, and then we're reducing kind of the carbon footprint of the home and the emissions and everything that comes from that as well too. So it's, just another really nice thing to think about when you think about how weatherization affects even landfills, even things that could be waste. Instead, it's going into homes, doing a job that benefits everybody too. So typical setup of our weatherization stuff, and maybe you've seen these guys in action around town, parked in driveways on the street, whatever it may be. And if they're in their hazmat suits because of lead paint or asbestos or something like that, that's why they're doing it, and that's why they're safe doing it too. So yeah, we'd like to make that impact, and we like to think of ourselves as probably promoting your mission, I guess, at least, throughout the 3 counties that we serve. Anybody questions? Any other way I can be of assistance to you tonight?
I'll just jump in quick here before questions start. So the main reason I had asked Jason to come present about weatherization today was just because he was crucial in some of the data points that were used in the previous month's presentation from the MIT students in their study that they did on Oshkosh, and kind of how they had explained what was needed in order to reduce the overall carbon footprint by 2050 to the goals that were established prior. So that's why I had Jason kind of present on this today, and I just want to say thank you, Jason, and yeah, open it up for questions if anybody has any.
If you'd like to ask a question, it's probably best if you can find the hand that's on the program and just raise your hand, because I can see that for everybody. I can't see everybody's. If you're raising your hand like this, I can't see you all at one time. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions from anyone else. I did have a couple, Jason. Tell me again what size area you cover out of this office?
So AdvoCap administers the weatherization program for the state in all of Winnebago and Fond du Lac and Green Lake County. Okay, so it's a pretty good sized area, and it goes beyond Winnebago. Yeah, yeah. And I would say, and it's kind of what I implied here, and just to kind of spread the message, if even if you have relatives, kids, parents, anybody that you think may be interested in something like this that would benefit from it, like there is a weatherization program administered by somebody wherever they live, if it's in the U.S. So yeah, well, Outagamie County Housing Authority does it up there, and in Calumet County, and we've got partners for community development and CAP services to the west and new CAP up in Green Bay. Community action programs are doing it everywhere, but yeah, we get to do it in the 3-county area.
Okay, so the 203 houses you were talking about, was that specific to Oshkosh or to your entire area?
That was to the entire service territory, and that's a pretty customary number, is a couple hundred houses every year between those 3 counties. I did grab that one that in program year 19, in a calendar month, we did 43 houses with an Oshkosh address, so I couldn't be specific if it was the city of Oshkosh or not, but yeah, so there's nothing that really dictates to us, X amount of houses have to be in the city of Fond du Lac, X amount of houses have to be in the city of Oshkosh, or even on a county by county basis. It really is geared in who's applying for the program and when. So right now there's a little waiting list, I would say, but if we had a deluge of people that applied from the city of Oshkosh, those numbers would be skewed a little bit more to be like, well, a quarter of the people to half of the people that you serve lived in Oshkosh. There's nothing that really prohibits that. It really is. It's actually even interesting that we have such a varied amount of applicants from all over our service area.
Okay.
And one thing to put in perspective too, Jason, I don't know if you said 43 was that number on the paper. That was for 2019 calendar year, correct?
Yeah, so I think it was 43 out of 200.
Yeah. And so the MIT project, if everybody can remember, so an estimation, let's say there's 13,000 residential homes in Oshkosh, 1% would be 130 homes. And they said that we would need to get this program up to about 7% in order to meet those 2050 goals. So it gives you a decent perspective on how many more homes would need to be completed and how much more funding is needed in order to reach those goals based on that study that they did.
That's a good point, Brandon. Thank you. I see Brad has his hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I appreciated the presentation. I mean, I guess this is what I was thinking about too, was this information related to the presentation we had from the folks from MIT. And I guess I wonder, AdvoCap is mainly serving kind of a specific demographic of folks for the weatherization project. Is that true? Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm wondering about what opportunities there may be to expand that kind of programming to other folks who just, may be able to afford, more weatherization, but just simply aren't aware. And is that something that the city or the county or the state can work with private businesses, or I'm at the university, so institutions like UW System, to kind of educate and make people aware about the importance of weatherization as part of their reduction in their impact on climate.
Yeah, I think a lot of what AdvoCap does kind of serves different demographics. We kind of fall in a very unique one, because while everybody that we serve does have an income qualification limit, like I pointed out, like 90% of the people that we serve already own their own home. So they're kind of in this spot where, maybe they are fixed income or just kind of like on a lower income for a temporary basis, but they do own their homes. They're, generally when you think of people that might not be income eligible for an assistance program like this, but are interested in energy efficiency improvements, tax rebates that have been offered at different times were kind of the federal government's and sometimes the state of Wisconsin government's approach at rewarding investment in energy efficiency. Focus on Energy is a great trade group, essentially, that has a network of professionals that deliver service. Targeted home performance is an aspect of that kind of bridges the gap between people that fall out of, well, we're not eligible for weatherization assistance, but we also don't have a ton of money. So they do a little subsidization for those specific households as well, but it's not a very large or well-funded program like the weatherization program is. other than that, yeah, there's not a lot out there, and like Brandon said a little bit. I mean, there's a ton of houses in Oshkosh. If you would consider a lot of the older homes, the character homes that just are not energy efficient, they weren't built to standards that we're building to today. Um, other than I mean, a strong encouragement, and maybe you can do something about that, and it's a good investment because you'll save more in energy costs than the initial investment to have the work done. Um, yeah, there's not a lot of other stuff I'm aware of that's sort of that.
Okay, I had another question too, Jason. When you were talking about replacing a furnace or a hot water heater, and you talked about maybe switching fuel systems, I heard that part right?
Yeah.
Do you ever consider like going from a hot water heater to a tankless water heater?
So the Department of Energy, right, again on that federal level, and then followed up a lot by state guidance, from DOA at the state. We're bound, of course, by certain policy. And what we didn't talk about today is kind of renewable, right? And of course, renewable energy is something that everybody would love to incorporate into this program at some point. But even tankless water heaters are not new by any means. But even with the advent of new technology, sometimes big bureaucratic programs are a little slow to adapt to that stuff. So right now, it's not an allowable thing for us to do or use our funding for. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of one of the shortcomings. I would say that weatherization assistance program, they're not. Well, they use some cutting edge technology to evaluate houses and implement safety criteria and things like that. Now, tankless water heaters aren't really going in. There are some split systems for AC, and we don't even really touch air conditioning, but there's a lot of efficiency improvements that could be offered. I guess they're just not standardized enough for a policymaker to say, yeah, go ahead. Those are allowable costs at this point.
Okay, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that you're probably not replacing furnaces with heat pumps either.
Well, so if you were to go down to a southern state, heat pumps and evaporative coolers and things like that, and air conditioning, consider weatherization assistance programs in states like Arizona. Completely different element, right? Because you're talking about trying to save electricity from air conditioning costs and upgrading efficiency there. The way we approach it in Wisconsin is different, of course. So what you use your funding on, what you have as an allowable measure to be able to do varies, of course. But yeah, so we're not doing that here. But it is done through weatherization and other places, as far as I'm sure.
Okay, would it be not allowable in Wisconsin because of the perceived problems with weather?
Yes, I mean, to some aspect, like everything that we do is kind of graded on a savings to investment ratio. And with our climate, it's just, things like that just aren't incorporated.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any other questions for Jason? Okay, I'm not seeing any. You must have done a fantastic job.
Well, last slide here, if I think I'm still sharing it here, is you got my email on the bottom, our phone number, the local office here. If you have a question or have an idea you'd like to bounce off, figure out, what we can and can't do specifically, for.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Sure. All right, continue your good work.
Thanks, Jason.
Okay, next on our agenda is the native plant brochure. Michelle, do you have anything you want to share about that, except that I still need to get more stuff to you?
Well, when I looked at the agenda, I haven't done more work on this, but I kind of wanted to circle back around to the point of the brochure and what we want in it. I know we've talked before about something probably already exists out there that we can use. We might not necessarily have to recreate the wheel. I did a search for native plant brochures from the DNR, and they do have a lot of resources on their website, which I think are pretty great, that we could print off and have at, tables once we start doing that again. But I just wanted to see if we wanted to create a brochure specific to the native plant sites that we currently have that are maintained by the Friends of Menominee Park Shoreland, or if we just generally want native plant brochures that can help people make their own gardens with native plants, rain gardens, and things like that. So I wanted to circle back around to the group and kind of see what your thoughts were on that.
Okay. Does anybody have anything to share with Michelle on that? Ken, go ahead.
I just had one question. Thinking about this as well, but is it worthwhile to have a native plant brochure that has plants in our city indicating what's on the shoreline? Does that make sense?
Can you say that again?
Yes, please say that again.
Well, I was wondering if the intent is, I wasn't quite clear on the intent. So should a listing of all native plants that are native to this geography as a whole be in there? However big you want to make that city, county, what have you, because it could end up in somebody's yard. And then on that list, you would indicate those things under management like you described. So it's sort of all inclusive.
When we looked at this project, probably 4 years ago now, which was about the same time that they were redoing the zoning ordinances and the whole zoning plan, and added a chart in there where their zoning sometimes will require a certain amount of vegetation or plants around the building or on site or whatever, and that's a point system. But they also list in the zoning code like a specific type of tree or bush or flower, and you get certain points for that. But they also tell you what you shouldn't use, like I don't know, what is it, Dutch elm disease, took out so many of our trees, so they say don't use that tree. So I had originally been working with a retired horticulturist from the county who was involved with wild ones, and she wanted to create several different brochures, one for flowers, one for bushes, one for grasses, I think, one for trees. And so that's kind of the path we had started down. But I think Michelle's correct now to ask, what do we really want? Because this is a different point in time. We do have, the zoning code does have a list there. I don't think they've ever published it separately at all, but maybe we want to ask. Maybe somebody has and we don't know about that. The idea of publishing just what we have in the Menominee Park site is a good idea if somebody was trying to replicate that. But to Ken's point, you're saying to show everybody what is native to the area in case it crops up in their yard when they least expect it, and what would be preferable to have. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, it's kind of also too, if you offer, and this may be beyond the scope of what you want to do, but I was thinking also having such an instructive brochure might add people in to our efforts here as well as others. If it had a utility to it that went beyond just what was under management at the shoreline. Just a thought.
Okay. Is any of this helping you out at all, Michelle?
I'm sorry, what did you say, Margie?
I said, is any of this discussion helping you out at all?
I think a little bit. So what I'm hearing is something that would be useful for people to be able to use and adapt to create more native plant gardens on their own would be helpful. is what I'm hearing, right? And whether that's, businesses or homes having a list perhaps of trees, shrubs, grasses, flowers, that would be desirable for this area.
Yeah, and that to indicate alongside things what you're currently focused on, that being native, they are also found here.
Mm.
You know what I mean? If they wanted to replicate those environments, but by also being citizens is native and allowable, not necessarily including the whole kitchen sink about what's not allowable. Maybe it does provide that utility to people and control into what the sustainability board is trying to do overall, and what you've actually accomplished in the city of Oshkosh at these other specific areas. I thought if there were ordinance based on what's allowable, that's a pretty good basis for a list, in terms of content that might be helpful.
I was thinking almost like I could give you, Michelle, that part of the code that lists the plant values for the different types of plants, and it could be maybe a twofold brochure too, where it's almost like a cheat sheet for a developer when we have these points that they are required to meet. They could decide if they wanted to plant all native stuff, how to reach that goal. Based on the native plantings and what their values are in the zoning code.
As we're working through this, we might want to loop in Bill Sturm, the city forester, at some point too, just so that he could make sure that we weren't giving out any erroneous information. Brandon, remind me, is this one of the projects the students had taken up also?
I don't have that paper in front of me, but I don't believe so.
No? Okay, I thought it might have been, but
Brandon and Margie, this is James.
in which case they're going to come to interview somebody, and they're probably going to interview Michelle, so.
Yeah, we got James Robbie here, the Director of Public Works. He's asking to speak.
Can you hear me all right?
James?
Can you hear me okay, Margie, or no?
I can't hear you. Can you hear him?
Yeah, I can hear him. Maybe just try turning your volume up a little bit, Margie.
Well, my volume is up pretty high. Okay, try again, James.
Can you hear me, Margie, or no?
Ah, there we go. Yeah, how can you be so quiet?
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know either.
One of the thoughts I had on that, having spent time in the native plant community, is potentially reaching out to suppliers. Like I know Marty's Blue Sky is a local landscaper who does a lot of stuff in the native community. They may be able to provide some insight, as well as I know Agricol is a big supplier of native plants in the state of Wisconsin.
And maybe borrow some from them too.
And they may be able to provide some guidance and input.
Okay, good thought. Thank you. Hey, James, could you maybe send Brandon some links for those places?
Sure, I'll see what I can find.
And then he can share them with Michelle. Thank you. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to share on this subject? Brad.
Yeah, are folks familiar with wild ones?
Yes, we've
Okay.
with them initially.
Okay.
The horticulturist from the county had been a member of Wild Ones, and that's kind of what got her started on this, I think.
Yeah.
And they're very good.
Yeah, I'm working on a couple of I'm working on one project in particular this spring for folks who are like ordering things through them, and I know they have a very extensive plant list that seems to be current, and would list all native things. There's another place, I believe in Green Bay, and they specialize in native plant offerings, so that would be another place. And I know they do I think they're willing to do some consulting with folks as well, so another good resource. I want to say the name of the place is Stone Silo. But Michelle, I can follow up with you on that if you would like.
She would like.
Sure, the more info, the better.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, then. Is there anything that you want from us additionally right now, Michelle, or should we bring this back next month and see where it's headed?
I don't think I have anything else on it right now that gives me a lot of things to think about and start with.
Okay, great. Our job here is done then for tonight. Let's move on to number 5 on the agenda, the duck ordinance. Brandon, you have an update for us?
Yeah, small update. Basically, the next step that's been requested is that we need to put this out to the public to get some input on their thoughts. So we're going to do a poll call survey with a couple of questions just to, like, again, get some feedback from the public. Couple questions that I came up with are, I'm just going to read them out to you guys. It's going to say something like, are you interested in keeping chickens on your property? Options, yes or no. If yes, prompted to state why. Are you interested in keeping ducks on your property? Options, yes or no. If yes, prompted to state why. Say something like, currently the city of Oshkosh allows chickens to be kept on residential properties after obtaining a chicken license. Should the city also allow ducks to be permitted? Options, yes or no. If no, prompted to say why. Currently, the maximum number of chickens allowed to be kept on a residential property is 4. Should that number be increased? Multiple choice options of, 4, 5, 6. So questions, similar to those. If you guys have any other questions that you think would be relevant for a survey such as that to get some, resident feedback. I guess that's similar to, you guys did something like that when the chicken ordinance was being produced. There was some public input, so they were just wanting to do the same thing for the ducks.
Bob, do you have something to share?
Yes, well, one, I'm reflecting upon the process that we did to create the chicken ordinance, and a lot of those public instances were at the Sustainability Advisory Board meetings, because it's just like the duck ordinance where we've discussed it, for several meetings in a row. We didn't have Polco at the time. In regards to I guess my question is, what will putting questions out on Polco do as it relates to us? Because we've spent a good part of a year at this point putting together, some of you more than a year, putting together the duck ordinance. How would that information be used in regards to, creating that ordinance or that policy at this point? Does that make sense?
I don't have the answer for you on that. I can get back to you. I'm just going off of what I was guided to do. So
sure. And the only reason I ask it is that I think many of us are at this point where we're ready to pass it on to the council, or to the plan commission to give us their direction on how to, whether we should deliberate further on it, or put it up for a vote up or down, and I'm just wondering, you put those questions out there, we're going to be sitting another month on those questions, and what do we do with them? Are they that important that they would change how the Sustainability Advisory Board looks at it, or are those more going to be results or comments that you want the council to look at? So I'm just questioning the merit of doing it at this point when we've been doing so much work on it already at this point.
Yeah, I understand. Thanks for the comments. I much appreciate them. I can maybe get an email formatted together and CC you on it and see if we get some answers regarding those questions.
Okay,
Yeah,
sure.
is that fair? Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Okay, well, I understand what you're saying, Bob, and I certainly don't disagree. I've always been curious how many people respond to a Polko poll and what is done with that information then, you know? What if 6 people respond and they all say no? Does that mean then we don't have a duck ordinance? But it's just because the people who wanted ducks didn't know there was a poll? So, yeah, anyway. But I know you've been instructed to do that, so we'll bring this back next month, hopefully, with some more information, another update. Okay, then let's move on to, okay, I see nothing else on that. We'll move on to salt usage, a discussion on salt usage. Michelle, would you like to take this away?
Sure. I know salt usage was something that we wanted to look at this year. Just in terms of, you know, can we maybe research some different things that other towns are doing, other cities and villages, and see if this isn't something that would be worth looking into for our city. Because there was a Salt Awareness Week in January through Wisconsin Saltwise that had a lot of really good information that just kind of brought it to my attention. So in our planning session, I brought it up as something that I think would be good to focus on. The intention is to get a little bit more information and kind of educate ourselves on this issue, and then perhaps formulate a recommendation to the city, or to, you know, possibly working with whoever we need to with the city to see what might be a better option, or, you know, kind of find out where we're at and where we maybe need to go for our water quality.
And of course, our concern with it is that anytime salt is used on the streets, it ends up in our waterways. There's just no way around that. And so we were
Correct.
thinking of researching better alternatives, just less salty alternatives.
Right. And I mean, some of the neat facts that they gave during a presentation too, there's, you know, of course, there's always an economic aspect to where they said Wisconsin uses 470,000 tons of road salt a year. And if you look at that as $70 a ton, that's $83 million in the total annual expenditures on salt. So there is a possible financial benefit as well, besides the environmental benefit. So that's helpful as well. So I guess that's just a summary of the issue that we want to look at. I could share some more interesting things that they found, or we can just, you know, move on to talk about the project with the UW Oshkosh students to help us with the education of this problem and different solutions.
Okay, I want to ask James at this point if, I know you're here, James, because of this issue, so would you like to share with us? Or do you have questions for us maybe too? Okay, I see. Oh, there we go. Go ahead. James, are you there? Does anybody hear him?
Mm-mm.
Oh,
No.
James, if you can hear us, James, yeah, okay, he said hang on in the chat, so he's probably having some technical issue or something
okay.
personal going on. So
I'll open it up to the rest of the board for now. Did anybody have other issues they'd like to discuss about the salt at this point? Bob, is that you raising a hand? No? Okay.
I guess I'm just curious, Michelle, did the students did reach out to you? I recommended that they did.
Yes, actually, Sam did, Sam Springer, and she's actually on the call tonight. So yeah, Sam had reached out to me, and we met briefly about it, and I just talked about some of the things that I learned from the different presentations that I viewed, and I sent a link to the Wisconsin Saltwise website, where there are more resources and more educational sessions coming up for people to educate themselves on this issue.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Brad?
I guess, you know, in terms of salt use, I mean, is there policy around when and how salt is used? You know, versus, so like, right, salt is not effective at certain temperatures when it gets super, super cold. At least some salts, you know, can be less effective. So, is there policy that has been developed around that? In addition, you know, I know the university, I've worked with our environmental, our like risk safety department, as well as our grounds department, to just kind of educate people about salt use, because I think oftentimes there is a perhaps perception, you know, that we aren't salting enough, you know, and so I think there's, you know, we try and balance, right, snow removal. Certainly salt does need to be used sometimes, but I also think keeping the sustainability, you know, kind of tenets in the back of our mind about salt use, and it's, you know, it does end up in our waterways, and it's, if it's chloride based, it's virtually impossible to remove. So that's problem one, you know, and then many other things that I think most folks can kind of identify with pretty regularly, right? I mean, you know, salt damages your car and those sorts of things. So I think sometimes an education and awareness campaign around salt use, in addition to finding alternatives, is good for just making people more aware.
That's a great idea, Brad. And I wanted to also share just a little bit more information as you were talking, that reminded me that the salt use has increased greatly from a study that they did in Madison, you know, within the past couple of decades. And it's possible that a lot of that is due to more, you know, winter storm events that can happen. You know, with climate change, we will likely see you know, great amounts of snow coming one time or another, or possibly, you know, these polar vortexes that can, you know, give us a lot of cold all of a sudden, where, you know, salt won't be as useful, and putting more salt down just won't help. So I think, you know, an education campaign and kind of understanding, I think also what we currently do at the city would be great, because that's something that obviously was not a part of that Salt Awareness Week, because it was a broader Wisconsin talk. So I think, you know, hearing from James once he's able to come back in here, so we can kind of see, you know, what's our current policy on it? How much do we currently use? The Wisconsin Saltwise said that we really need to reduce our salt usage in our state about 50% or more, ideally, from what we're currently doing, just because of the amount of salt that they were able to detect in the lakes around Madison. So it'd be interesting to find out how much we have in Lake Winnebago as well, but that is also our drinking water. So we have to keep that in mind as well. We want to keep that clean.
I see that James has his microphone off. Do you want to try it again? Okay, I think we're getting nothing. Am I correct? Okay. I just wanted to add that, you know, one of the weird things when I moved to Wisconsin, Colorado, where we have a lot of snow, is that they put salt on the roads here at all. And maybe we need to ask that question, why salt? I mean, and I realize because of elevation and humidity, it may be a totally separate issue, and maybe there's a reason it has to be salt, but the sand works just fine to get up and down over the Rockies. So I kind of don't understand why we need salt on, we don't even have a hill in Oshkosh. So what's the big deal here? So I just raised that question. Maybe it doesn't have to be any sort of salt. Maybe it could be something that wouldn't be as damaging to the waterways.
So
And
let's give
I
you guys
think
an
that's
update.
something, I'm sorry.
James is private messaging me here. He's having some difficulty, not quite sure. He tried a different computer. So if he gets it figured out or can call in or something, he can help us out with some of the salt questions that we're having. Otherwise, I'd say we just continue on and hope that he can jump on eventually.
We can always invite James back next month to actually share with us, because at that point he'll know more where we're coming from, and we'll maybe have some more of our information, and maybe Sam will have some stuff by then too. Yes, Michelle.
I think what would be good for us today, because obviously there's going to be a lot of questions about salt use, salt alternatives, things like that, is maybe to help give Sam direction in where we want to go, or where we would like their research to help us this semester for their project. And I had mentioned that I'd be interested to see what salt alternatives are being used around Wisconsin and their efficacy, and the potential to possibly use something besides salt. Some of the alternatives that I learned about during these sessions, obviously sand, things like that, but there are pluses and minuses. And one of the ones they added about sand was that it adds to sediment and things like that. So there's not really a perfect solution. But one of the biggest things that was promoted was pre-treating with a salt brine when we know a winter event is going to happen, and making sure the snow is cleared, and then post-treat with brine or salt as needed, and that can really reduce the amount of salt used because it makes the salt go a longer ways. However, the person that presented on that was from a company that does salt brine placement. So, there was some bias there. So I would really like to see some information about that. So I think
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
My headset's been working fine all day, but for some reason, when I get on here, it doesn't work. So I've had to switch computers and stop using my headset.
We can hear you great though, James, so it worked.
Frustrating, very frustrating. So to answer some of your questions, yes, we absolutely have a policy. Our snow and ice removal policy is available on the Streets Division page of the Department of Public Works website. We do use brine. We have been using brine for some time. The use of brine has significantly reduced our salt usage over time. During, in preparation of a storm event, when we are expecting, either snow or ice and freezing rain, we go out and directly apply brine to the street to try to keep that stuff from bonding to the pavement, so we can easily remove it with the plowing equipment. We also, all of our plow trucks, all of the new ones that we're getting, and I think almost our entire fleet now, if not our entire fleet, all has pre-wet capabilities. So all of the salt that we do apply goes down pre-wet, so that it is able to better function and not just kind of roll off into the gutter line where it's not effective or useful. Also, a big part of our policy is, if you've driven through residential local streets, we don't put salt on any of them. It's placed in areas, curves, hills, etc., where, there is an issue from a stopping standpoint, and it's used more on our arterials and collector streets. So we do have a policy. We do follow it. Certainly the big storm we had right before it got, sub-zero temperatures, You know, that storm started with rain, so the brine we did apply got washed off. So that resulted in the snow and ice being able to bond to the pavement. So it took us a lot longer to try to remove that material because it turned so cold. The salt was not, you know, going to be effective. So we did not use any during that sub-zero temperatures. Our streets division supervisors all have pavement temperature sensors in their trucks so that they know when pavement temperatures will or will not allow salt to function, so that we're not using it when it won't function. We do regularly attend a number of training sessions. I know some of our supervisors attended one of the SaltWise functions last week. We regularly do send supervisors and operators to not only the APWA snowplow rodeo where they talk road salting, but we also send them to the Fox Wolf Watershed Alliance sponsored parking lot winter maintenance program as well. So we do regularly send a lot of our staff to all of those various training opportunities and exercises. All of our equipment, salting equipment, is calibrated annually before the season starts, and then if the operators or the supervisors are noticing anything weird, we'll bring the equipment in and recalibrate during the season as needed as well.
That's all, James? That's all you're doing?
Oh, there's a lot more,
I'm
Marty.
teasing you. You know that. I'm thinking that Samantha might actually want to have an appointment with James and talk streets and salt. Do you
Yeah,
have
I
that
mean,
name on your list, Sam?
it is, you know, certainly it is a hot topic, you know, in the community. You know, I can't even begin to tell you the number of complaints we got during this cold snap about, you know, my road's not plowed. Yes, your road was plowed. It's just the material was able to bond to the street, and it takes us a little more time to remove it. So, you know, to be able to completely get away from salt is going to require a very daunting educational campaign with the general public in this community. I will say during that cold snap, we were using sand in some locations to provide some traction, just because salt was not functional. But we do try to limit our use of that as well, because that material does accumulate in the gutters. It accumulates in the storm sewer catch basins. It accumulates in the storm sewer, and, you know, ends up in the lake as well. And you know, we do have some permit requirements for reducing the sediment load to the lake and river as well. So there is no perfect solution, unfortunately. You know, we don't live in a world where you know, the invention of Frosty the Snowman 2 to just spray something and get rid of all the snow exists.
Okay, well, I'm glad you were on here so that you could help us understand some of this. As I recall, you kind of are good at that. I think
Well,
the last time we asked you something, we got a real good explanation too, James.
You know, and I'd be happy to try to share, you know, some more of our policy information. You know, I can get some of that stuff over to Brandon if you'd like, and he can get it out to you so you can see what some of our, you know, some of our published policies are, and how we deal with snow and ice in the winter.
Yeah, that would be great, James. And also some contacts, maybe. Like, I think it would be really interesting for the students, and maybe if Michelle wanted to join them, to like see where the salt is kept, and like just maybe you know, I don't know if someone has time to spend any time with those students to kind of educate them on what they're researching for their project. I think that'd be cool.
You can always start with me, Brandon.
Okay.
A question I have too is where the brine comes from and what it consists of, you know? So maybe that could be part of the educational process too.
At this point, our brine is all salt brine, manufactured on site at field operations. When we completed the construction of our facility, it included a salt brine making equipment. So we do not, you know, prior to that, we were getting it out from Winnebago County, and literally one equipment operator's job for an entire day was going and filling the tanker truck and coming back, and you know, so we took that load off of, that particular operator, and we have equipment and storage on site to be able to produce brine.
Okay.
James,
Michelle,
I'm sorry.
I was just looking to see if we had anybody else who had questions for us.
I think Ken's been trying to chime in.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you've really been forward thinking on this, but I was wondering, you made a statement about, I think I'm duplicating sound here. But what I was wondering is, what's your process, your scorecard in terms of like how you limit overall annual salt distribution, to prevent storm sewer drainage system damage, how you select those things like curves in terms of safety, and how you prioritize all that, salt supply and cost, any environmental things that you mentioned in terms of runoff into the local water streams and things like that. Is that more of art than science, or do you guys have some sort of formal scorecard formula? Or
We don't really have a formula or a scorecard, Ken. We focus primarily on our major arterial streets, and then our secondary streets are our collectors, and bus routes are in that secondary route. So those are our first and highest priorities during an event. So, if I've got very limited staff, for example, like generally second and third shift during the winter, I've got 2 staff on each, and obviously we can call in as necessary. But, if we're in a situation like, with some of our recent storm events that were very long in nature, where I've had, the equipment operators have been on the road for 12 hours. I got to get them off the road and get them home and get them some rest. So, we keep a skeleton crew on overnight, and that's their focus, those primaries and the secondaries, if they can get to them, until we can get the full crew back on to do a full assessment and a full workout in the city. But
thank
it
you,
is
because I mean, it does seem like there's a lot that goes into your calculus, so to speak, of this, and it's kind of impressive, actually.
Yeah,
like you just mentioned a bunch of things I didn't know.
Yeah, and a lot of it, in all honesty, like I said, during the week, we've got staff on duty 24 hours a day. On the weekends, we do not. We've got a supervisor on call at all times. So, during those times when we don't have staff on the weekends, we're relying a lot on the police and fire department, who do have staff on at all times and who are out on the roads, to keep us apprised of what they're seeing. Because we don't have staff on all the time. During the week, when we do have staff on all the time, we've got our own staff keeping our supervisors apprised, as well as police and fire calling us and asking us questions. So it is a lot of art and a little bit of science. Certainly the science comes into understanding when our practices are going to work and when they won't work. And the art is kind of figuring out when to hit everything versus just kind of hitting a few things.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to share? Any questions? Michelle, your hand was up.
It was, but I wanted to share, so I wasn't the only one blabbing at everyone. So I have a couple of follow-up questions too. If there were any studies done that you're aware of, James, about the salt content of the Fox River, Lake Winnebago, where we are, and also when your department started making changes and implementing all these great practices that you're talking about.
We do not have a lot of historical data on the waterways. I can tell you this: the Foxwolf Watershed Alliance is monitoring Campbell Creek and Sawyer Creek for salt content over the testing on the lake, just because of the way the lake functions. So they were monitoring one location on Campbell Creek and one location on Sawyer Creek this past winter. And I'll get Brandon the link to their webpage that's got some of that data from this winter as well. Because I wasn't sure if where all they were doing it, and I had some back and forth with one of their staff that was doing the research, and she said doing the lake itself was problematic, so they were doing the two creeks. And certainly a lot of what we've done as far as the practices that we've implemented, historically speaking, I'll be honest, it wasn't done necessarily with the environment in mind. It was done with cost savings in mind. But certainly, spending less on salt is good for the environment as well, because that means we're putting less salt on the road. So that certainly has been our focus historically is, how can we minimize our salt usage? We are responsible to report to the Wisconsin Department of Transportation how much we use on an annual basis. And obviously some winters are very different than others. You get a winter where you get 2-3 inches of snow every 4 days. You're going to use a lot more than a winter like this where we've only had, a few storms all winter. So, but I can track that historical data down and share that with Brandon as well.
That would be great.
And in case you're wondering where the salt is stored, if you've seen that big, kind of dome-shaped structure at field operations right at the corner of 3rd and Idaho, that's the salt dome. At full capacity, it holds between 4,500 and 5,000 ton.
James, did you mention fluoride when you were talking about testing in the creeks?
No, chloride, salt, chloride.
Oh, chloride. Okay, thank you. I was having trouble figuring that out. Now it makes sense.
No, sorry. Like I said, it's bouncing between all the computers. I'm sure I'm not being picked up as clear as I'd like to be.
Well, we'd like to just see you in person, but maybe next time,
Well, my normal computer does not have a camera, so.
James, I have one follow-up.
Sure.
I was just curious. I don't know the statistic, but how many properties are on private wells inside the city limits? Do you have to take that into consideration in usage?
Very few properties within the city limits are on private wells. The vast majority of them are on public water. The ones that are on private wells have to be permitted and tested through the plumbing inspector.
Okay, any other questions, anyone? Or comments or thoughts? Okay, I have a suspicion we'll be bringing this back next month for further discussion. Or actually, maybe after May when the class is done, right? Okay, then we'll move on to social media discussion. I'm going to throw this to Brandon and or Vic.
Not much of an update. We didn't do a lot of posting for the month. I did not get a batch of posts to Brandon like I like to do every month. But the posts that we did make were very successful. Lots of interactions. A poll was done too, which was really neat to kind of gauge some interest regarding electric vehicles. So definitely high engagement, just not a lot of actual posts. I also haven't gotten any of the get to know your SAB things back, so I'm just going to go with there's not a lot of interest at this time. So I'll just save that for some other time when maybe people are more interested and willing in sharing little bios about themselves. But that's really all I have.
Okay.
Yeah, just encourage everybody, if you've got something that you think is worthy of the Facebook page, send it my way, just or Vic's way, or just get it to me some way, somehow. I try to spend a little bit of time on Facebook searching for things, but I try not to spend too much time looking for things to share. So
I'm sure you have a couple of other things you have to get. It's okay. Yeah. Okay, then. Let's call for agenda items for a future meeting. Do we have anything new that anybody wanted to add to a future discussion at this point? Okay, I think we'll be here.
Margie?
Yeah.
Can we put something on about starting to look into like an application to the MREA for a solar group buy? And I know we probably need Brandon to find some information for us for that. For a solar group buy, for the city to sponsor a solar group buy through the Midwest Renewable Energy Association. And I can
Yes,
send
and you sent me that information, Pat, so I do have that.
And there's, I know we can't do a whole bunch on it until maybe Brandon takes a look at it, and I'm not sure what his schedule is.
Right, and it came in too late to go on this month's agenda. I'll share that with Brandon and we'll discuss it I wrote it down as a future meeting. It might not be in April, but it will be soon.
Okay.
Because as I recall, that was the rolling one, right? They're always kind of looking at.
Yeah, they said it's open all the time. Yep. And part of what we have to figure out is the process for a homeowner to the permitting process and fees involved to a homeowner to get solar panels.
Right.
That's part of the application.
Okay.
Have to be figured out.
Yep. Okay, I have that down. And obviously we'll have native plants, deck ordinance, salt use, social media. So far, it's looking a lot like tonight's meeting, except we'll no doubt have a different speaker next month. Anything else anyone has? All right, then. Our next meeting will be on Monday, April 5th. And again, it will be virtual. The city has committed to staying virtual through all the way through April for the meetings so far. I also wanted to mention that on Monday, March 20th, is that right, Brandon? State of the City? State of the City will be, I think it's the 20th. I know it's on Monday night. I don't have my calendar.
22nd.
22nd? Okay. Yeah, I guess probably the Monday would be better than the Saturday, huh? It'll be,
thanks, Brad.
This will be the first time that they've done it 100% virtual. And so we're going to have to give an awful lot of credit to those guys at Oshkosh Media. They've been doing a fantastic job. So if you have the opportunity to see that, and I'm sure it'll be recorded and portions of it will be shown later too, but other than that, I have nothing else. If no one else does either, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Who was that?
Ken?
Ken, okay. Do I have a second?
I second.
That was Michelle, I believe.
Yes.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
We can't actually do that.
Aye.
We have to do
Oh, what?
which I forgot in the beginning. We're supposed to do roll call vote.
Roll call vote,
Yeah, for everything.
even for adjourning?
I believe so.
Okay, go for it, Brandon.
I know. Okay, Pat,
Hey.
Eric,
Okay.
Margie,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
Ken, Vic,
Aye.
Lisa,
Aye.
Brad,
Aye.
Bob.
Aye.
Thank you.
You just wanted to be sure we all stayed on till the end, didn't you?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, guys, thank you.